Hey fans, welcome back to Rauscher Racing Weekly. I'm Blake Rauscher, and this week I'm going to be talking about some of my personal racing history. So for our first thing, we're talking about how I got into racing. And I was just talking about this with my dad. I thought we got into racing because obviously we were racing at Fernley where my dad was racing his pro stock. And I don't really remember a lot of that. I remember like we seen an outlaw cart on the internet, and I thought I was talking to my dad like we would be cool to do that. And then we seen they were racing there, and then we got into it, bought a cart, and we started doing that. But at that time, I was doing a lot of baseball. I was a big baseball fanatic. I was doing a lot of that, and I had a really bad season with my coach. We weren't having a really good time. I was sitting a lot on the bench for some reason after being our starting pitcher, and they took me out, and we were done with that. And my dad said, "Let's stop doing this and go racing." So we started getting into that. We bought all of our stuff, and yeah, it went from there. So yeah, it went from there, and I remember our first time we got into the carts. My brother was so scared, he was crying because he didn't want to do it. And this was at Fallon. This was their play day they were having. And we went out there, and I had no clue what the flags meant at the time. So I went out there, I was just flat-footing it in my box stock when they had the really old motors. I don't even know what you call them. They're like the flathead type things. And yeah, we went out there, had a good old time. And then after that, we didn't go back to Fallon for a while. We started racing Fernley. We started doing their points there, I think. It's really a lot of fuzziness because it was so long ago. But yeah, we started racing there. I started in the box stocks. I didn't do beginners because I was too old at the time. So we started right in the box stocks. We went out there. And I think the Subaru motors had started coming out that year or the year prior. And those motors were pretty fast. And compared to that, I couldn't really compete with some of the kids that had that. But we went out there, had a good first season. And we just went out there and started getting the feel of it. And then so our next part we're going to talk about is my biggest accomplishments. I have a lot of accomplishments over my racing career. I've won a lot of races out there in Fernley and Fallon. I've won some races over in Battle Mountain, I believe. I won some heat races, no main events. One of my closest races there was for $1,000. They had a big old race. A lot of the Idaho guys were there, all the Battle Mountain guys. And I remember this in the A main, me and my friend Jacob Diaz, we were running side by side. I was on the bottom, I believe, or I believe I was on the bottom. He was on the top, and we didn't touch we didn't touch bumpers for like 5 laps. It was really good racing up in the front. We were just going at it. And then I dropped a chain, I believe, is what happened. And I got black flagged because I guess you weren't allowed to join back on the track under green. I went on like at a really good time. Like everybody was over in turns 1 and 2. No one was over in 3 and 4 where the on ramp was. And I went on the track and they black flagged me for that. They didn't like none of that. And that was for $1,000. That probably would have been my biggest one, but other than that, my biggest racing accomplishments are all the championships I've won. I've got about 3 or 4 under my belt. And then my first open win, that was a really good one because over at Fallon at the time, they had a lot of open drivers that we were racing against, and it was some pretty good competition, and I was doing really good that day. I think I swept the night. I won my heat race. I don't know if we were doing 1 or 2 heat races. I won both my heat races if it was, I remember. And then I won the A main. And the track that night, usually at Fallon, it was like right around the bottom. But I went around the guy. I remember this. I've seen him at Cycling a few times. I went around him on the high side. And after that, I was just smooth sailing. And then it was like 25 laps or so. At the end, my arms were so tired. I was just dead. And I came out on top that night. I got the W. And I remember that night, my friend Jacob, he was so excited. I got out of the car on the backstretch. I was giving hugs and stuff. I remember that. It was just a really good night. And then other than that, my other biggest racing accomplishment is probably my 250 when I had against the Opens at the DTC in Fallon that year. I was at that year or the year before. It was a couple years before that, something like that. I went out there, and one of the biggest races they have of the year there at Fallon, and there was a lot of karts that year, but no 250s. I think the only ones was me and my brother. So we ran with the open class, and we went out there, and I did really good again. I'm not sure if I swept the night or I got a second place in my heat race, something like that. I started up front with the opens, and then I walked away with it. It was like a 2-day show, I believe. I won. I didn't win the second night, I believe, because we ran during the day. But the first night I won, and I finished top 3, I believe, the next night in the main, and I came out on top with points that weekend, and I won the Dirt Track Champions. That's what the DTC is. And yeah, I got a trophy. It was going to be a pretty big payout. I think it was around $1,000. I think it was like $600. But I tied with one of the other open guys that went up there that weekend. So we had to split the paycheck. We both got, they had another trophy made so we could both have first place because we tied. We didn't have a tiebreaker thing really at the time. And yeah, so that's probably one of my biggest racing accomplishments. Our next subject is my worst crashes. As you all may know, if you've been following us this season, I have a lot of crashes. Like, it's not nothing new to me. I do that a good amount of the time, trying to just send it in there and do my best. But yeah, it happens. But one of my worst crashes I can remember was my second time in my 250. I think it was one of I don't know if he'd raced the weekend before at Fallon, but it was my second race in it, I believe. And we went out to Dixon, which is a big old track. You're just flat-footed the whole time. You're just going. And I remember this one chick. I was running the line. I was actually doing pretty good for my second time in the car. I came from the backstretch wall. I went to go down to the bottom of the corner, and this chick, she was running like the middle to the bottom, and she was like, tried to like slide into the corner all weird, like with one of those squirrels you see out there. And she ran me over, and we both going like full throttle, like the way she came in there. We both flipped really hard, and I cleared the wing a couple times, and I was up there a ways, and she sent all the way to the fence. But yeah, I like really wrecked my car. Not too bad. I could continue on, but like later to come out, I didn't have brakes. Like after I went into the hot pit, my hood was destroyed. My carburetor fell off, so we went to the hot pit, got that all fixed up. My dad pushed me back on the track, and they started me up, and they were about to go green. We were going down the backstretch, and I hadn't have brakes, and that's pretty scary. Like my second time in the car on this big old track where you probably want to use the brakes a little bit. I didn't have any, so I stopped the car right there on the backstretch, and they didn't go green. And then my dad was like, "Don't be a pussy" type thing. Just go out there and just send it. And so we did that, and I ended up actually finishing fourth because there was a wreck, I believe, like one of the last couple laps. They wrecked, and I was able to get up in there. I finished fourth with no brakes. I remember afterwards I like did some circles to get the car to stop because I didn't know like what else to do. So I just did some circles, and I got out, and my dad was really proud of me for finishing the race like that. But yeah, that's probably one of my biggest wrecks I've had. Welcome back from the break. So for our last subject, I'm going to be talking about our 2021 race season goals. And this season, it's going to be a big year for me. I graduate high school in June, at the end of June, and Cycleland season starts around late March, early April or so. And yes, I'm going to get to do some of that before I graduate. And so basically my season's goals is just go out there. We've got a lot of knowledge from our past season there. We know how to set up the tire pressures later in the night and stuff, which we were struggling. We were struggling with setup at the beginning of last year, but I think we're going to go in there pretty strong. Hopefully, I think we're going to get the engines tuned up a little bit, maybe some new pistons before we go back, so everything is nice and fresh. We're going to have a fresh start. And yeah, my goal is to just go out there and do better than last year. I think I finished top 15 in points out of like the 80 or 90 cars they had signed up for points. So I want to go out there and do better, finish better than the A mains. I got into the A mains, but I didn't like move up or like start really good last season. I was always like the last transfer for my heat race, so I'd always start pretty deep. So I want to go out there and just do better, qualify a little bit better. I was getting some good qualifying times, but now I know a little bit more. I've been watching a lot of racing, just like knowing more about the track and stuff after going there. And yeah. Make sure you check out our Facebook page, Rauscher Racing, for weekly updates on our show, Rauscher Racing Weekly, and our race schedule. That should be coming out pretty soon. And now we're going to head over to Mom's Corner.
Welcome back to Rauscher Racing Weekly. This week we talked about Blake and some of his highlights, his accomplishments, some of his 2021 goals. I'm going to let Kim kind of talk about seeing him go through it, and we'll go through there.
Yes, Blake is, he was 8 years old when he started racing. I think he touched on it. He was playing baseball and he had to choose. He had to choose between baseball and racing. I wasn't paying for both. So he chose racing. So he's never looked back. He's loved racing. Like Evan, he has raced at several tracks. Locally, it is Fernley 95A Speedway, Rattlesnake Raceway, Battle Mountain, Dixon. He has been obviously to Red Bluff and Cycleland. I don't know if I'm missing any. But he's a hoot to watch. Blake is a natural talent, different than his brother. He likes to be more calculated, almost to a point of frustration for his dad, because he is so tame on the track sometimes. Where his brother will just drive right in there. When he started out in the 250, he couldn't finish a race, so you have a two-spin rule. He'd go out there every time he was on the track for the first 2-3 races. He'd two-spin out, and then after,
and early on.
Oh
too.
yeah,
it wasn't like he got a few laps in and then did it. No.
No, it was like first corner spin, second corner spin, done. Yeah. And it was very frustrating. I think it was about the third race. It was just very natural for him. And he took off. He won the championship that year. He was the fastest. As soon as it clicked, he was the best. Him and his best friend Jake raced together that year, and they were 1 and 2. And he stayed in the 250 for a couple of years, and then we were in Battle Mountain for the Silver Cart Classic, and he broke his engine blew up. He was leading the thing and his engine blew up. So day 2, we were there with a friend, and they said they had a car in the trailer. If we put it together, we could race it. Another family paid for his entry fee for the opens, and he put an open together, and that's the open we bought. That's where Blake started in his opens. He came from the back and raced hard. He got right up there in the top 5. He had some rough times. The car was not necessarily put together the best. I think his steering wheel came off, and he did spin like a top, and yeah, but he had a good time. That's where he started with being in the open, and where he is now. So yeah, and Blake's doing really well. I know he's got some goals. This is his senior year, as he has said. I know he wants to go into welding and doing that kind of stuff next, but he does want to stay racing. So we're going to see where that goes from here.
Yeah, I think it'll be a new thing to share that time with going to school and racing and trying to just balance life and fit it in. It'll be a little bit different for Blake. I think he talked about T-balling while his dad was racing, and so those were things that we juggled. Sometimes cars were parked at the track the night before or early in the morning. Then we would run back, do baseball. Sometimes his dad would have to run out there to get it ready to get in his car, and then Kim and I would load kids and head out to watch, at the time, David race, or David and Derek race. And so that was kind of juggling. I think Blake's going to have to find that juggle.
Oh, yeah. Blake doesn't juggle very well right now. I've told him, I'm like, you should get a job. I can't do it, Mom. I can't do it. I'm like, life, you're going to have to learn how to juggle work and racing and
stretch the hours in the day.
I guess. Yes. And working on the car. So that is a thing that my boys are doing now, is that they're both working on the cars more, turning wrenches, doing their thing. That way, Dad's teaching them so that they could eventually someday take over and do those kinds of things, and Dad can just kind of go and enjoy.
Yeah. And then I saw on Blake's today that we're missing a decal up there.
Yes, so Rancher's Diesel has been on our car for about 2 years. Rancher's closed his doors, and he has decided to partner up with Sparks Diesel in local here in Sparks. So he's going to be running his shop out of Sparks Diesel. So they will be back on the car. There is still room if anybody else would like to join our car for sponsorships. We are looking for new sponsors. All of us together are looking for sponsors for the 2021 season.
Yep, sponsors are kind of a necessity to keep it going. And as you can see, there's space that is always available, or that this side most of the fans see. So it's kind of a nice place to be, to have, and it's new and ready for 2021. Thank you, and join us every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on CSTV, Rauscher Racing's Facebook page, and Brent Rauscher Motorsports Facebook page for updates and schedules.